Hey, this is Dave from Dave's Hunting, Shooting, and Bushcraft, and thanks for coming and watching this video. I do appreciate it. As many of you know, May is a month reserved for recognizing those who serve in law enforcement. And in the process of law enforcement, you have those who make the arrests, those who prosecute, and then those who handle those who are incarcerated. And it's the end of the line, but often it's the forgotten ones who manage that process, in my view, the correctional workers. And this week, today's May 9th, so this week is Correctional Workers Week. And it's a time when correctional workers are recognized and remembered and thanked for their efforts each and every day in managing the incarcerated of this country. All across this country, there are jails and prisons, state, local, county. So you got city, you got county, you got state, and you got federal facilities that have incarcerated individuals across the country. Through 395,000 correctional workers. So almost 400,000 people who work in the line of corrections. And corrections is those who work in jails, those who work in prisons, those who work in detention centers, juvie centers, across the board, around 400,000 people. 34,864 are Bureau of Prisons. So around 35,000 Bureau of Prisons. So why I single out federals, I worked in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for 20 years, left that service after my 20 years to go work at the United States Mint. 6,200 facilities for housing the incarcerated. Of that, there are 122 federal facilities. Federal, not a huge portion, but yet a measurable portion. How many people are incarcerated in this country? About 1.2 million. Of that, about 158,000 are in the Bureau of Prisons. So the Bureau of Prisons, 35,000 staff members at 122 facilities, with 158,000 inmates being managed each and every day. In my career, I worked at a penitentiary at Terre Haute. I worked at a federal correctional institution at the time, Butner, North Carolina, but it was also the place where inmates with mental health issues were placed. And then it became a full medical center later on. They call it a complex, where there's a variety of institutions there. And so that all happened after I left. I have an old picture from there I'll show you too. I worked in our headquarters for a little while. I went back to the field and worked at Fort Worth, Texas. I had worked at Fort Worth prior. The first time I worked at Fort Worth, it was a co-ed facility, believe it or not, a long time ago. There was some, trials of how best to house inmates, and so one of the trials was to have co-ed facilities. And so these were low security inmates, male and female, and they had different housing units. And you can imagine that was a bit of a challenge. But, overall, I think we were very successful in managing it. Then I went back to Fort Worth, and when I went back, it was then a medical center. Same facility. They had just changed it into a medical center, added a medical wing. My next institution was at Fort Dix, and that was my last placement in the field. I was at FCI Fort Dix. And now, on my side of the career, what I did, my degree is an accountant, and I got a job working in prison industries, and I started working in the business office at Terre Haute at the industry section, where they made blankets and towels. They had a huge wool and cotton factory. So I ran an inmate detail in the business office. We did things like inmate payroll and bought the goods and supplies needed for manufacturing, accounted for all the sales and stuff like that. It was an interesting job. The thing you have to understand in the Bureau of Prisons is that everybody's a correctional officer first, And so that meant, even though I worked in the business office, I still had to do things. I still helped around the institution if there was fog, fog patrol, or if there was, a need for staff to assist on a shakedown of a unit. We'd go and help with that. Standing steam line, so you stand behind the food service lines and watch the inmates to make sure they're dealing out the food on the up and up, stuff like that. So and plus every shift you had to shake your inmates down before they went back into the unit, and you had a whole process of security measures that you followed. And so at the end of the day, you did your accounting work, but you were also doing a lot of correctional work. And this is just a side story of me. I couldn't join the military because of a bad knee. I ended up going to college and getting a degree in accounting, which I don't regret, but my first inclination was to go serve. Finding the Bureau of Prisons in a way to serve America, it was really important to me. And so some people don't look at civil service as an honorable profession, but serving in law enforcement, I really believe day in, day out that what we did and what people do in penitentiaries and correctional institutions really make a difference in this country. When I went to the law enforcement training academy, I took it really seriously, and was really I even to this day I feel that serving my country is one of the greatest things that I could do. So here's a couple things from the different institutions I worked at. So here's me on the right back in when I worked at Butner, and that's John T. Haddon, and so he's given me an award. This is me at FMC Fort Worth. When I was a medical center, my second time at Fort Worth. So it's my last day actually, and I'm blowing the whistle, and the warden there is George Killinger, and off to the far left, that's Susan, was Marlowe at the time, but now Susan Johnson. So this is the picture of the executive staff at Fort Dix. This is my last station, duty station, and you can see I'm in the middle, and the warden at the time on the far left is Art Beeler, and this is definitely a really good team we had right there. Mr. Beeler left and was replaced by Nancy Bailey, and I enjoy working for her as well. So I was fortunate to have some great leaders to work under. So look at this, 50th anniversary from Terre Haute, and that was back in 1990. And so Warden Tom Kent, Federal Prison Industries. And if you look right there, you can see on the last guy in the back row on the top, on the right. That was my career. I feel for the correctional workers in that I still think today they're at the end of the caboose and often forgotten. So this time of year is a great time. If you know somebody who works in corrections, it's a great time to reach out and say, you know what, thank you for the job you do. This is one of the first things I got. This is my first day. I got this whistle. So I don't think they carry whistles anymore, but that was a way you could call. They had radios and another instrument they called body alarm back then, and there were not enough for every staff member to get them. So if you worked in an area where there were other staff members, so somebody in that area was assigned a body alarm, somebody was assigned a radio, and if you were like the young guy, like I was, you didn't get either. So I didn't get one. I had a whistle though. And then, so I have these little chits. These are just little brass, like coins. They have a little hole on them. And in the morning, when you went to the control center, you'd take your chit and you toss it into the tray, and you'd say, give me B32. And that, the B32 would be your key ring. And so the chip would go on the board and you'd get that key ring. And when you got your keys, you had to count them, B32 had 8 keys. So you count it, make sure you had 8 keys. You'd leave the control center area and go out to do your job. You had to wear a name tag. This is my last name tag. This is when I was associate warden at Fort Dix. So that's my very last one. Always had to wear a name tag. These are the weapons that the Bureau of Prisons had at Terre Haute when I first started. We had of course this is a Remington 870. So yeah, no red dot on it. That wouldn't be there. But it was the basic 870 model. In fact, that's what I qualified on, was a Remington 870. We had that M1 carbine, which is a 30 cal carbine rifle. And so you qualified on that. The other one that you qualified on was the M14, which my son has one. I do not, but I need to get an M14. The pistol that I used was this right here. It's a Model 10, Smith & Wesson Model 10. This one has a heavy barrel. I put its sister up here. This is Model 64, and so you wouldn't see that in the prison. They all would look like that. So yeah, that was back in the day. Sometime in the 90s they switched. I think it was the 90s. Switched over to semi-auto pistol, and then more of an AR platform. The firearms mainly used, when you were in a tower, when you were on patrol outside the fence, patrolling. Inside the fence, you did not. Also, if you were escorting an inmate to a hospital or to some other type of transportation, like they're moving from one facility to another, the officers moving them are going to be armed. All right, so I'm going to end this video with just 2 things. One, if you know somebody who works in corrections, just take a minute and thank them. Thank them for what they do. And if they're retired, thank them for what they've done. It's often a forgotten and thankless job, but in society, managing the incarcerated is a very necessary job. So no matter how you feel about it, right now the way it is, it's necessary. So yeah, take a minute to do that, and then I'm going to read through. These are the fallen heroes, the Bureau of Prisons. There's 26 staff members who have given their life in service and died in the line of duty. And so I'm going to read their names, and then one of the officers, one of the people died as an officer, and I'm going to tell a story. All right. Joseph B. Waltrip, Andrew F. Turner, Edgar A. Barr, James R. Brock, Andrew H. Leonard, Robert G. Wonke, Royal C. Klein, Harold P. Stykes, William A. Miller, William W. Latimer, Vern M. Jarvis, Wayne L. Seeley, John W. Johnson, Donald F. Reyes, Janice R. Hayden, Gregory J. Gunter, Gary L. Rowe, Merle E. Klutz, Robert L. Hoffman, Boyd H. Spikerman, Robert F. Miller, D'Antonio A. Washington, Scott J. Williams, Jose V. Riviera, Eric J. Williams, Osvaldo O. Albarete. So the one I'm going to talk about is Scott J. Williams. He's the last officer that died while I worked in the Bureau of Prisons. Since I have left, there's been 3 additional who died in the line of duty. But I thought it's tragic. Scott's death was tragic, but it definitely died a hero, and represented what could happen to any staff member at any time in a Princy. This is just how it goes. At approximately 6 p.m. on the evening of April 3rd, 1997, Senior Officer Specialist Scott J. Williams and other staff members were supervising the routine movement of inmates from the dining room back to their cells. Suddenly, inmate Roy C. Green produced a weapon and stabbed Officer Williams in the neck. Inmate Green then stabbed a second officer in the chest, injuring him seriously. 3 other officers who rushed to the aid of their colleagues were also seriously injured as they subdued the inmate. Although mortally wounded, Williams' last act of his life was to protect a fellow officer. The injured staff members were transported immediately to a local hospital for emergency treatment. Officer Williams passed away and was pronounced dead at the hospital at 6:55 p.m. Following the murder, inmate Green was transferred to another facility and he remains in federal custody. Inmate Green was indicted on April 2nd, 1998 on 1 count of murder within the jurisdiction of the United States, 1 count of murder of a correctional officer, 3 counts of assault with the intent to murder, and 1 count of assault with a dangerous weapon with the intent to do bodily harm. On December 2nd, 1998, the Attorney General authorized the United States to seek the death penalty. Officer Williams was a Marine veteran, a former Marine of the Year who served in Desert Storm. He was survived by his wife and 2 daughters. Scott J. Williams is listed on the National Law Enforcement Memorial. He is on panel 42E20. Scott, you will not be forgotten. It's so true. All right, for Dave and Lillie, out.